Well, hey, this is Joe, and welcome to my little garage-based workshop. And look what I have right here. I have a Smith Corona 5 Series Sterling typewriter. So what happened was, is somebody saw the Associated Press story a couple weeks ago about the typewriter revival, and they contacted me. It was an elderly lady. She had had this typewriter in her family since the late 1940s. Her mother used it, and she was wanting to get rid of it, so we arranged for her to come over to the house. I took a look at it. It's nothing that I don't already have. It's a 5 Series Smith Corona. I have a Silent Super. The Sterling was kind of on the lower end of the 5 Series. It looks very similar to the other two that I have, but what caused me to want to go ahead and buy it was because it's a script font machine. I don't have a script font machine in my collection, so I thought it would be good to get. For that reason alone, I got it for a pretty good price. It's pretty dirty. This thing is in pretty dirty condition. So I've just taken it apart yesterday, and I'm starting to clean it, but you can see there's all kinds of grunge. The segment is really filthy. Look at down here in the keys and the bars below them, and the little comb is just really filthy with grunge and everything. So I'm starting in the process of disassembling and cleaning it. Luckily, I do have Ted Monk's typewriter repair Bible for these floating shift 5 Series machines. So I am in luck, and I'm going to be working on this and trying to get it all cleaned up. Well, it took me several hours, more than several hours, out in the garage yesterday working on this typewriter to get it cleaned up. Yeah, it was pretty dirty inside, I gotta tell you. The body panels were filthy. When I started, I was using a Windex and a toothbrush on the body panels, and as I was wiping it off, I started getting a bunch of brown stuff, and I thought, oh no, the Windex must be dissolving the paint or something. But no, that wasn't the case. It was just whatever I'm suspecting might have been years of cigarette smoke accumulation and grunge coming off. But it cleaned up pretty good. The inside of the machine mechanically was one of the dirtiest I've ever seen, which is interesting because you know, I've had several really filthy machines I purchased from Craigslist locally, and usually the ones I buy in the thrift stores aren't too bad because the sellers try to clean them up, but this was pretty dirty. One of the funny things about it, when I was putting the body panels back together yesterday, was there's two combs. Well, there's this little panel here that has the blue, white, and red ribbon color selector dot indicator dots, and it has the holes for the top row of keys to go through. And then there's the actual comb down here, a metal piece with slots. And I couldn't figure out how to get that thing back in there, and it turned out to be you have to hold your mouth just right. And yeah, it was like there's no way that's going back in there, but anyway, it did go back in there. One of the other things about this machine I noticed is, let me flip it up and show you. These body panel screws, for instance, this one and the corresponding one on this side, there's two back here, and there's more on the bottom. All of those originally had these little tiny flat rubbery kind of black washers. And on this machine, those washers have disintegrated into black tar. So as a consequence, this machine has a little bit more kind of rattly metallic sound when I'm typing, and I don't know if it's exactly because it's a Sterling, it was the lower end, it's not a Silent or Silent Super, and maybe they just weren't built to be quite as quiet, or maybe it's because it's missing those washers. But one of these days I'm going to get some sheet rubber and make my own little washers, or go to the hardware store and get some. As far as the condition of the machine, let's see. The hinge, the right hinge for the ribbon cover, was missing this screw right here, and the carriage, the right carriage, let's see if I can move this over, is missing. This little cover right here on the front is missing one of the screws for it. Other than that, it was in pretty decent shape in terms of the mechanical condition of it, other than just being totally filthy. Now, once I finished cleaning this machine, I started going through Ted Monk's service manual for this, and checking the alignment. I only had to do a couple of things. First of all, let's go back up here. The space bar. The right side of the space bar was sitting lower than the left side, and you had to press it almost all the way down to the bottom of its travel before the carriage would, the escapement would trip. And there is an adjustment for that in the manual that essentially involves bending these two little arms related to the space bar. And this bottom arm has a rubber pad that bottoms out on the frame, and you want the escapement to trip before it bottoms out. And then the top part you bend to get the spacebar flush with the body panels. So I had to do that. Then the other thing was, if you were to move one of the keys, let's see here if I can do this. If you move one of the keys toward the printing point, right when it hits this guide here, the front of the guide is when the escapement should trip. And this machine, it was tripping almost all the way toward hitting the ribbon. It was tripping too late. And the adjustment for that is to bend this arm right here on the escapement. The shape of that determines when or how soon or how late the escapement trips when the type bars are coming up. So those were the only really two adjustments it needed, other than being really filthy. Oh yeah, one other problem was the bell wasn't, end of line bell wasn't working at all, and that was caused by, there's a bracket in the back on the carriage that actually hits the bell mechanism, and that bracket was totally bent. Something happened to it at one time, but I had to reform that. So we do have a working bell now. Yeah, so the quality of printing on this machine is quite nice, and as I indicated earlier, this is the only machine in my collection with a script style font, so that was really one of the reasons, the main reason I bought it. But it has a pretty good quality imprint. I have not adjusted any of the vertical alignments of the letters. It's a little more difficult to tell if upper and lower case are actually aligned because of the way these characters are shaped. They all have descenders and ascenders, but I haven't touched any of it. It looks pretty good to me. One thing I did notice, the N key, if you look right next to this capital A, the first little descender on the N looks like it's a little short. And I looked at the type slug, and I can't quite tell if it's worn or not, or if that's just the way the letter is supposed to be, but that's just the way it is. Oh, you can see next to the right here, this N looks a little short on that first descender, but that's just kind of the you know, the attribute of this particular machine. Every machine has its own attributes based on its wear and its history and all that, but it's a pretty interesting machine. I like the larger style pica font in this italic style font, and it's going to be a good letter writing machine, I think. One of the other nice things I like about the manual that Ted Monk put together is the type styles, typefaces that they have listed in the back of the book. And so I was kind of going through here to see exactly which one I have, and it looks to me like it's this pica italic number 2. And comparing their sample with my example typing, I'm pretty sure that is it. So it's the pica italic number 2, 10 characters per inch, 6 lines to a vertical inch, and you get charged extra for it if it's not these models here. Well, it was fun working on this machine. I do like working on these 5 series Smith Coronas because everything is so easy to get to and the adjustments are straightforward, and the manual that Ted Monk wrote is so easy to understand. Those Smith Corona procedures actually from back in the 50s were so well done with how they underline every little part and have an arrow drawn to a diagram that shows you where the parts are. But it's a really nice little machine to have. One of the things about owning another typewriter in my collection is I really don't have room for it. You know, sincerely don't have room. And when we talked to the lady on Sunday, last week actually, and she came over on Sunday, there was a little bit, my wife, you know, she was like, well, okay, another typewriter, but realistically, I'm going to have to get rid of some of these machines in my collection because I really kind of like the higher quality medium-sized portables, and I like small portables. I have 3 of these 5 series Smith Coronas now, and I think what I'm really going to do, I've been thinking about my typewriter collection to pare it down just to the essentials of what I like. I think what I'm going to do is try to find a local school teacher that might want to have typewriters in his or her classroom, and I would be willing to donate some machines for that purpose, especially machines that are reliable and rugged like these and work pretty good. So that's kind of what I want to do with my collection. You know, another 5 series machine, yeah, brown, green, medium size. They're great machines overall, but they, you know, it's just too many of them. One other thing, and this is kind of a rambling video, not really well structured, but if you're not familiar with the Sterling line here in the model in the 5 series lineup, it's a lower end typewriter from the Silent and Silent Supers. One of the differences is the Sterling doesn't have the end of page system on the left end of the platen, the markings where you can tell when the end of page is coming up. Doesn't have that. It has fixed tab slugs in the back behind the paper guide. You fold this down and there are fixed this one came with 3 metal slugs, and those you can manually put them in different slots, but that's the fixed tab system. And then flip it around this way. And then, so the Silent and Silent Supers, you can remove the platen very easily. You flip up the bail, flip this here, you pull out the little knob in the center of the left knob, and you flip up a lever and the platen comes right out, the platen roller. On the Sterlings, you actually have to loosen a set screw, pull off the right knob, take the screws off this cover, and then there is a nut that you loosen and you slide a little lever out of the way to get the platen to release. So it's not instant release like for an office person to do on their own unless they have some tools. So again, a little bit lower end, not quite as full featured as the Silent and Silent Super, but you know what, it's still a 5 series machine. As far as the quietness of it, as I indicated earlier, I'm not sure if some of that, I'm sure some of that was engineered into the Silent series, and this probably is not quite as, it won't be as quiet. It has all the soundproofing, you know, the felt linings inside the body panels, but it's still a little bit noisier, and maybe it's those rubber washers that I mentioned earlier underneath the screws. Maybe those things are just needing to be replaced. Now, I don't want it to sound like I don't like 5 series Smith Coronas. It's just that I have 3 of them. They're all pretty much the same. But if you look into Ted Monk's Typewriter Repair Bible for the 5 series, let me show you the whole lineup. And there's one model in that series I really would like to have. That is the Skywriter. See, I have the Silent Super, I have the Sterling, I have the Silent, and I have the Electric, which is wonderful. But this is the little portable that everybody claims is one of the best portables, small portables ever made. I would love to have a Skywriter, but alas, they're hard to come by. So the case that it came in is not the holiday case. It's this darker, squarish case. But what I found interesting was, it's actually the inside of the case is quite clean, but it came with this plastic, probably vinyl or something,
typewriter cover. Now, it's not branded. There's no branding like Smith Corona on the cover, but it fits the typewriter really well, and actually would fit a lot of the other medium-sized portables quite well in my collection. And so I'm guessing that this was a generic typewriter cover that was sold to them when they bought the typewriter by whatever shop they bought it from. And by the way, the provenance of this typewriter is that the lady I bought it from, her mother bought it when they lived back in Kansas. So this is a Kansas Midwest purchased typewriter. There's no dealer sticker or anything like that that tells what shop it was sold from. But it has this little cover, and I really think it's cool, and I could definitely use this on some of my other machines. You know, when this typewriter is in its case, it doesn't really need the cover, so I can use this. So that's cool. I got a little cover, and you know what? It's actually it's a really interesting material. It's like a textured plastic that feels like cloth, and the stitching, there's a stitched hem all the way around it. Pretty well made. Someone should copy this and start selling these. It really would work for a lot of these medium-sized portables. Well, this is Joe Van Cleve, another 5 Series Smith Corona, a sterling this time in italics font style. Well, I got me a letter writing typewriter. Works pretty good. Until next time, I hope you guys continue to have fun with your typewriter writing and collecting. Until then, you have yourselves a great day.